Hello and welcome to a leaflet for educators looking to learn more. Today we're looking at an article titled Demystifying Tuition. The study examined how institutions' websites present financial information to the public. So if you are a student or you work in higher ed, this is definitely of interest to you. I find it was a very interesting, it wasn't a quick read, but it felt like one. It was one of those kind of things. So with this study, researchers sought to characterize patterns in the scope and quality of tuition information on how institutional websites, and to understand how these patterns might influence individuals' conceptions of tuition and costs. Their findings point to variation in informational quality across dimensions ranging from clarity of language use and terminology to consistency and coherence of visual displays, which accompany navigational challenges stemming from information fragmentation and discontinuity across pages. So in their introduction, they talked about how institutional websites are the primary means by which colleges recruit first-time freshmen. Students and families are often ill-informed about college prices and financial aid, leading students to compare the costs and expected benefits, and this decision-making is damaged when that information is not clearly presented by the website. The little research up to this point has been done on the ways colleges disclose cost information to the public. So specifically, the study wanted to examine how tuition and cost information is conveyed through the websites of public colleges and universities in the U.S., inform institutional practice, pave the way for future research on how information delivery may affect prospective students and families. Now, they had two key research questions here. Number one, how does quality of tuition and cost info of university sites vary? And how do variations in this information quality shape user experience and conceptions of tuition and cost? Now, why does this information matter? Well, they quote demand theory, which is that as the price of a service increases, quantity demanded by consumers decreases, which explains the anticipated negative relationship between tuition and enrollment, and human capital theory, which is to say that students behave rationally in their higher ed choices by accounting for potential lifetime benefits and projected costs of the degree. Imperfect information is a barrier to this rational decision-making, and Perna's research suggests that differences in attaining and using information about college costs and financial aid are critical in understanding racial and ethnic and socioeconomic group differences in college enrollment. Socioeconomically disadvantaged students are more sensitive to tuition increases due to dependence on loans. High school students in general generally lack accurate or complete information about college costs and financial aid. Now, how do we understand information quality? You might have some kind of intuitive idea of what makes for quality information. Hopefully, this show would be some example of presenting information in a quality-oriented way. But how do we break that down? We have net calculators on university sites that vary in usability and in quality of information. Net calculators that can be used to calculate, like, this is how much it might cost for you to go to school here, but they might factor in costs that don't apply to you without breaking those down and telling you what those are. Or they might do the opposite. They might underestimate dramatically and not give you the option to change those inputs. So institutions are not all complying with federal mandates and how they influence one's ability to make informed decisions, primarily the example being these net calculators. Now, why is that? We have this kind of dichotomy, we have public and private goals in education. Okay, we have the credentialing and vocational purposes of college being overemphasized throughout one's high school career, at least. We have the actual learning being underemphasized, which may lead students to enter college unaware of the rigors or fundamental goals of a college education. Okay, they might be going just for the certificate, just for the potential increase in income. Increased minority representation and information and promotional materials, which I'm sure you've noticed if you're a student, or if you're a teacher, masks real underlying challenges of underrepresented college students, as we mentioned earlier. Lack of clarity of information regarding the finances of going to school can be a major issue there. So how do we determine, when it comes to the quality of information, the effectiveness of a site? we can look at user beliefs about a site's usefulness in gathering information and the site's ease of use when used by the researcher. So that's what they did in this study. They reviewed 3 dimensions of usability: representational quality, interpretability of the information provided, contextual quality, relevance of information to a target audience, and accessibility, so the availability of information. So their method, they took website content from 50 public 4-year colleges and universities. It was a random 50 designed to be a nationally representative sample. They took an inductive lens, which means they focused on the symbolic meaning communicated in the design and placement of visual and textual data on the sites, which may have been consciously or unconsciously infused in the actual decisions made by the designers. They took in process-oriented data, descriptive accounts of information searches, and published page views. They considered frequency of use and outcomes of navigational tools and resources, and they focused on information quality, which again is clarity, accessibility, and coherence. Now let's talk about the results of this study. They found that navigability, that's a hard word for me to say, often arose as a barrier to clarity and coherence of presented information. They found that the model for most sites funnels users from home page to admissions to a more detailed cost breakdown, usually spread across different pages. They found that aid and scholarship information usually separate from cost of attendance overviews. Net price calculators are used to individualize that information a bit more. They found that in 10% of cases, supplemental information like course materials fees, registration fees, room and board policies, and differential tuition rates were overlooked or misinterpreted by the research team, and they found that needing to navigate multiple pages or sites naturally disrupts information flow. Now, let's talk a little bit more about the net price calculators that we mentioned earlier. They are required federally for university sites, but they make assumptions about enrollment patterns and personal spending habits like food and phone usage. Ways in which net price calculators differ from information on the school websites were surprisingly prevalent, okay? The currency of tuition and fee information. Researchers found outdated cost information in more than 75% of cases by a 1 to 2 year lag. They found requirements for housing and student health insurance were differing between the net price calculator and then the information published on the website. For example, the provision of options for all students that are not actually available for all students, like the requirement to live on campus if you're a first-time freshman, or assumed costs like transportation being rarely explained. They also found differences between the applicability of differential tuition policies by program or enrollment year. That is, net price calculators tend to underestimate costs for students in specific programs, like education. They also found that schools using custom net price calculators showed less discrepancy, so the more they would break away from the federal template and kind of have their own custom calculator for that university, taking their students' lives into account a little bit more. So they also found that ambiguity, of course, leads to misconceptions. The strategies to sell appear favored over those to show or explain financial information. They found that non-admissions pages are more likely to contain technical, undefined, and ambiguous terms and categories. They found that admissions pages focus on credential and economic rewards of higher ed, and both of these practices can detract from clarity and transparency and damage student decision-making. So in the research overall, they had 4 overarching themes that they found. Number 1, variation in quality and presentation of information is prevalent. Number 2, universities are similar in the sequencing of information and user flow. Number 3, convergence of information from local and external sources often results in incongruencies. Number 4, variances in page design, use of technical language, and content specificity across departments within a university highlight differing and competing agendas for communicating financial information to different audiences. So what are the conclusions and implications of this research and these 4 themes? The important elements of a university website design are clear and descriptive language, consistent interconnected visual displays, navigational tools, and content, and integration of information across state and consortial levels. So our researchers have made 2 recommendations based on this study: that cost information should address the needs of varying minority groups, and that they should avoid the use of third-party net price calculators, which are especially prone to discrepancies. Rather, they should have their own kind of in-house if this is the appropriate term to use here, they should have their own in-house net price calculator for the university. So future research might examine whether site quality varies with other aspects of higher ed in ways that might impact student decision making. And they might gather page clicks or page view records from the university websites to support further research as well. They also found that communication tensions arise from competing influences. That is one of the major conclusions here, is that the competing influence is not just between the state and the university, not just between the student and the university, which are major problems on their own, but between departments within a university can lead to major clarity problems on the website, with students getting information from one department with one agenda on one page and different information from a different department with a different agenda on another page. So you can see how that might be an issue. I would love to know what you guys think about this. If you're watching this on YouTube, leave a comment below. If not, sorry about your life, bro. That means you're listening to the podcast, which I appreciate. So thank you for subscribing. You have a wonderful day and never stop learning. Thank you so much for listening.